I knew the rules of the house. Stay hidden, stay silent. But some things you couldn't unsee. That night, Marcus Ashford decided my mother was nothing more than a forgotten stain. The glass shattered, the red wine spreading across the polished marble. It was an accident, but to Marcus it was a personal insult. My mother just stood there, completely still. He waved a hand, dismissing her, dismissing the entire incident. The guests, already murmuring, turned back to their champagne. His world was always perfect, no matter who he broke to keep it that way. I pulled back, the heavy tapestry muffling the sounds of their laughter. The anger was a cold, unfamiliar weight in my small chest. It felt like something had just broken inside me. I moved through the back passages, the scent of their expensive perfume fading, replaced by dust and damp stone. My world was here, always had been, always would be if I let it. My mother's room was small. A cot, a worn chest, a single window too high to see out of. It was everything they thought she deserved, everything they thought we deserved. I sat on the edge of her bed, tracing the worn pattern on the quilt. She always kept it neat, always kept her head down. But I knew what they had done to her and what they continued to do. Upstairs, the party continued. Marcus was probably holding court, basking in their admiration. He never saw us. Not really, just shadows moving in the corners of his perfect gilded life. But I saw him. I saw them all. From the shadows I learned their rhythms, their tells, the subtle ways they took and took and took. And I learned to be invisible. My mother's silent tears, the way she had bowed her head. It was more than shame. It was a wound. And I knew, with the cold certainty of a child, that I would heal it. My small hands clenched, knuckles white. They thought I was a ghost. They thought I didn't matter. But ghosts remember. And ghosts come back for what's owed. I would make them see me. I would make them feel it. Every single thing. Starting with Marcus Ashford. My name was Julian. And I was going to take everything. They never saw me in the library. Just a boy. But the words on those pages, they ignited something. A cold, quiet fire. The echo of Marcus Ashford's laughter still rang in the air. I kept walking, away from the light, the anger a hard knot in my chest. This was just the beginning. My mother was always there, a quiet presence in the cramped room. She never complained. Just kept moving, kept working, kept living. Sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, she'd pull out that little book. Her eyes would narrow, her pen moving with a purpose I couldn't understand. The Ashfords, meanwhile, lived in a different world. Their voices echoed through the grand halls, full of casual dismissals and self-important laughter. I started wondering. The mansion had so many rooms, so many places to be invisible. The library, with its towering shelves, felt like a world apart. Amongst the classics and forgotten histories, I found them. Discarded business magazines, months old. Their glossy pages promised a different kind of power. The words were alien. Leverage, arbitrage, derivatives. But I saw the numbers, the movements, the way fortunes were made and lost. I started to draw them, lines and arrows, how one thing affected another. It was a game, a very complex, very dangerous game. From the shadows I listened, Marcus and Helena, their voices low, discussing asset rebalancing and hostile bids. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the intent. The magazines weren't enough. I needed more. The library held secrets. If you knew how to look for them, it was buried, high up, behind a row of ancient philosophy. A thick, intimidating volume. Corporate finance. Advanced strategies. Marcus Ashford extended his hand across the white linen. Julian, I've been watching your work. A casual smile. Ashford Corporation could use talent like yours. The financial textbook was heavier than it looked. But the numbers inside it, they showed me a different kind of power. A path out of the shadows. Years bled into each other. The boy with the book became a man who understood its every line. And then, he became a ghost in the corporate machine. My own office. Small, unremarkable. Exactly how I wanted it. The work was precise. The results, undeniable. This contract, for Sterling Capital, was my latest test. A hostile takeover target, deemed impossible. I simply saw the leverage. The Sterling board had called it a lost cause. I gave them the numbers. The strategy. the precise angle of attack. The deal closed. Sterling Capital had acquired their target, my fees substantial, but the real prize was the ripple effect. Marcus Ashford liked to consider himself a titan. He noticed the tremor in the market. He noticed the architect behind it. My own account balance reflected the work. Enough to start. Just a fraction of what I intended to take. The numbers were one thing, but the real leverage, that was hidden deeper. In the quiet fury of a woman who saw everything, an email landed from Marcus Ashford's personal assistant, an invitation to dinner. At the Obsidian Room. The Obsidian Room, a place I'd only seen in magazines. Now I walked through its doors, a guest. Their guest. He found my table, a predator surveying new territory, but this time the prey was watching back. He presented his solution with quiet confidence. Helena watched from the back of the room. Her green eyes narrowed, a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. I had seen that look before. Marcus Ashford extended his hand across the table. His smile was confident, oblivious. I took it. The first step was always the easiest to misinterpret. The Ashford Tower rose into the morning light, a monument to their unchecked power. Now, it was my new office. The air inside felt colder. Marcus laid out the problem, a tangled web of offshore assets and a failing subsidiary. "Clean it up," he said as if it were a spilled drink. I nodded, as if I were just a cleaner. A new office was sparse, just a monitor and a desk. The problem Marcus gave me was designed to be impossible, but their impossible was my starting point. My mother's notes floated in my mind. 3 days later, I presented the solution. It wasn't what they expected, it was better. Marcus's expression shifted, just for a moment, from dismissive to impressed. Helena caught my eye across the room. She was Marcus's daughter, and she saw more than most. She didn't trust easy wins. She didn't trust me. Marcus called me into his office. "You're indispensable, Julian," he said, a rare compliment from him. He promised more access, more of everything. Indispensable. The word tasted like ash. My mother had been indispensable too for 30 years. They never saw her. They would see me. The new access was a key. I used it to dig deep, an old, obscure data point in their legacy systems. It matched a faded entry in my mother's archive. The first thread. The tower glittered against the night sky. A symbol of their power, yes. But now, my shadow was inside its walls. A quiet, patient shadow. Marcus handed me the new security pass. Platinum, level 4. Full access to internal servers. He smiled, utterly confident in his new acquisition. He had no idea what he'd just given me. My hand found the seam. Cold, almost invisible. A faint click echoed in the silence of the old room. This was it. Everything I had been searching for. The pass felt heavier than it looked. Level 1 access. I slid it into the reader of my new terminal. The green light blinked. My name, on their network. This office, sterile and empty, was everything they thought I was. A blank slate. They had no idea what I'd bring into these walls, or what I'd take out. The tower hummed around me, full of secrets, but the deepest ones weren't in their servers. They were hidden in the dust of their past. At the mansion, I remembered every angle of that estate, every shadow. I was no longer the boy hiding in them. Tonight, I would own them. The air inside was thick with stale opulence, the ghosts of their parties, their laughter. It felt hollow now. Empty, just like I remembered. This was her room, where she had spent 30 years. Every scratch on the floor, every faded patch on the wall, a testament to what they had taken from us. She'd been so careful, so meticulous. I knew she'd found a way to hide it. Somewhere only we would know to look. Then, the faint resistance, the subtle give, the click. My mother's secret, finally revealing itself. Dust coated the leather-bound ledger. A few faded photographs. My mother's silver locket, pieces of a life I was now meant to finish. The weight of the ledger was immense, years of silenced injustice. It felt like a promise and a burden. I had to be worthy of it. Back in my sterile office, the ledger felt out of place. A relic. But every page held a truth I now had to uncover and weaponize. I opened the cover. pages filled with dense, cryptic handwriting, unfamiliar symbols. My mother's legacy. It was more complex than I'd imagined. The ledger lay open, pages of cramped, precise script, my mother's hand. But the words, they twisted into something else, a language I didn't yet know. I traced the lines, dates, names, figures, but the patterns didn't align with any public record, any market trend. It was all a dead end. Hours bled into each other. The Ashfords, oblivious in their mansions, had no idea what I held. This wasn't just accounting. This was something else entirely. Every entry felt deliberate, but the connections remained hidden. A phantom limb of information, just out of reach. It was a cipher. It had to be. My mother wasn't just documenting. She was encrypting, protecting her secrets, even from me, until I was ready to truly understand. I tried every algorithm I knew, every cipher method. The screen flashed red again and again. It was more complex than anything I'd encountered. The frustration was a familiar weight. For years I had walked their halls, a ghost. Now, even my mother's legacy felt just as untouchable. Not for long. There had to be a key. Something she left behind. My mother was meticulous. She wouldn't have made it impossible, not for me. I ran my fingers along the binding, the edges of each page. She'd spent years compiling this. It wasn't just a book. It was a vault. I remembered her. Her hands, always busy, always precise. Every stitch, every fold. Nothing was accidental with Margot. My thumb brushed against a faint ridge along the spine. Not a flaw, a seam. A hidden compartment, deep within the binding. Tucked inside, folded small. Not another page of code. A photograph. And on the man's lapel, that same symbol. The key. The spreadsheet glowed. 2 numbers, decades apart, finally aligned. Julian felt a cold, quiet satisfaction bloom in his chest. A small victory, but the first true one. The photograph was the key. The symbol on the unknown man's lapel was etched into my mind, a pattern I now hunted across every cryptic entry in the ledger. Days blurred into nights. The ledger's code was a labyrinth, each symbol a dead end, each number a whisper of a secret I couldn't yet hear. But I kept digging. Hours turned to nothing. I ran every algorithm, cross-referenced every known financial symbol. The code held fast. It was designed to keep secrets, not reveal them. Then a pattern, not in the numbers, but in the symbol's placement. It wasn't a code for transactions. It was a marker for specific types of transactions. Land deals, obscure property transfers from decades ago. I needed to access the city's historical archives, the kind that weren't digitized, the kind no one bothered to check. The Ashfords had built their empire on shadows. I had to find the exact point where their foundation met the dark, the one place they thought no one would ever look. Then a name, a land parcel, a date. It was buried deep in a public domain document, a minor detail no one would connect to a family of their stature. The document detailed a small, almost insignificant land transaction, but the figures, they didn't add up. A discrepancy that, on its own, would mean nothing. But in my mother's ledger, under the symbol, the same land parcel was listed, with the correct figures. The ones that had been hidden from public record, $2,000. A small sum, decades ago. But it proved everything. The ledger was real. My mother had been right. And the Ashfords were vulnerable. I closed the ledger. One small truth. Now I needed to find the rest, the real secrets. And the man in the photograph, he knew more. He praised my diligence, his voice booming across the boardroom. But her eyes didn't miss a thing. She knew it wasn't just diligence. The city lights blurred through my office window. The ledger was closed, but the work had only just begun. Their arrogance was a weakness I would exploit. It was a minor discrepancy buried deep, a land acquisition from '07, misclassified in a subsidiary report. Helena's department. Perfect. I needed someone else to find it. Someone eager. Someone who would see it as their own triumph. Someone exactly like Cole. He practically vibrated. Mr. Julian, I think I found something huge. The bait had been taken. Hook, line, and sinker. Marcus dismissed it as a clerical error, until I pointed out it was in a report he was about to present. Then, suddenly, it was diligence. He clapped my shoulder, beaming. Excellent work, Julian. Your attention to detail is truly invaluable. He truly believed I was on his side. The report was flawless. My correction had made sure of it. Marcus presented it as his own triumph, basking in the board's approval. The applause was deafening. Later, I saw her, alone in her office, poring over the old report. The clerical error had been in her department for years. She was smarter than Marcus. A small step, a single thread pulled, but the Ashfords were starting to unravel, one perfectly placed correction at a time. The game had truly begun. The knock came a week later. Soft, precise. Helena. I knew this wasn't a social call, not with her. She smiled. A thin, sharp line. Mr. Julian, my father sings your praises. I have a new project, highly sensitive. I trust you'll assist me? She wasn't asking. He was young, bright, and hungry for recognition. Cole, I had watched him for weeks. A quiet data ghost in the system. Helena's offer was a calculated move. She thought she was giving me a test. I knew she was giving me the keys. The project brief was dense, full of operational minutiae, but buried within it, I saw what I needed. Access. My mother's ledger had gaps. This project, Helena's project, was about to fill them. Every single one. Cole was diligent, invisible, perfect. He would never see the knife until it was too late. I walked over. His head snapped up, startled. A perfect opening. I mentioned the report he'd found last week. The subtle flattery worked. He practically preened. Then I brought up Helena's new project. Said I needed someone reliable, someone I could trust. He agreed instantly. No hesitation. He didn't see a burden. He saw an opportunity. My opportunity. I gave him the first list. Seemingly innocuous internal reports, data points that would unlock a decade of their fraud. He didn't question it, just nodded, already planning his approach. A useful tool indeed. He would deliver it all. Every secret, every hidden number. He would be the one to open the vault. The screen glowed, reflecting in my eyes. My mother's ledger, now illuminated with new truths. It was all falling into place. Cole was still eager, still taking notes. I just needed to point him in the right direction, ask for the right reports. He thought he was climbing the ladder. He was just digging the Ashford's grave, one file at a time. The game was in motion. All I had to do was watch him play his part. He found it. An obscure audit report from '07. A needle in a haystack, exactly where I knew it would be. The first batch of files landed in my inbox, just as requested, just as planned. I cross-referenced the data, a pattern, a link to the coded sections I couldn't touch before. The Ashford Tower stood, a beacon of their power. Inside, the work continued, unseen, in the quiet hours. Hours later, Cole sent the final comprehensive package. Exhausted, but proud of his contribution. The last fragments folded, and then the archive shifted. A new section alive with meaning. The names, the dates, the hidden transactions. A deeper betrayal than I ever imagined. Cole had given me the key. Now the Ashfords would pay for every single secret. The screen pulsed, then the lines of code dissolved. Years of whispers, decades of injustice. It was all there. Every shadow transaction, every stolen cent, my mother had seen it all. Cole's data, now integrated, had brought the archive to life. A new layer, illuminated. But it was still just a fragment. The true depths were still hidden, waiting. I spread out my mother's physical ledger next to the screen. Her meticulous hand, every entry a silent accusation. The digital data from Cole, clean and clinical, started to reveal the pattern. A date in her ledger, a specific account number in Cole's report. They didn't match. Not exactly. But they shared a common thread, a unique string of characters hidden in plain sight. I started cross-referencing every anomaly, every slight deviation. Hours turned into days. The coffee grew cold, then was refilled. The silence of the office became a hum, and then it clicked. A specific sequencing of numbers, a unique digital fingerprint, a financial signature buried deep in every illicit transaction. My mother had found it first. The sheer audacity of it, the scale. This wasn't just a few bad deals. This was a systemic plundering, decades in the making, and they thought no one would ever notice. I fed the signature into the archive's decryption algorithm. the system word, processing years of hidden data. The true map of their empire was about to be revealed. The first section unlocked. Offshore accounts. Shell corporations hidden behind layers of numbered companies. The Ashford name never appeared directly. It never had to. Each node represented a transfer, a hidden asset. Millions, tens of millions, siphoned away, year after year. The true legacy of the Ashford family wasn't earned. It was stolen. The system processed faster now, connecting the dots. From London to Hong Kong, from Swiss banks to Caribbean trusts. A global web. And I had the key to unravel every single strand. The archive screen flickered, revealing not just a scheme, but a sprawling, interconnected web of illicit transactions spanning 3 continents. He dismissed it with a wave of his hand, a casual flick of the wrist. Marcus, oblivious. But Helena, across the table, she watched me. Her eyes held something new. The cold open screen still glowed, a sprawling, interconnected web of illicit transactions. 3 continents. Decades. My mother's work. It was all there. Now, to choose, I scrolled through the ledger searching for a thread. Something small. Something current. Then I saw it. A discrepancy hidden in plain sight tied to a recent land acquisition. A $250,000 difference. A single digit misplaced in a multi-million-dollar report. Innocent enough, but my mother's notes confirmed the truth. It was never innocent. The smallest error could unravel everything. Or, if placed correctly, it could be the first domino. I inserted the false entry. A single keystroke. Irreversible. The corridor stretched ahead, glass walls reflecting the city. Each step was a commitment. To my mother. To the years of silence. To the debt they thought I'd forgotten. Marcus held court as always. Helena beside him seemed to absorb every word. I waited, invisible as they reviewed the quarterly projections. My cue was coming. Then, the relevance slide appeared. I cleared my throat. Page 37, I said. The land acquisition figures. A small discrepancy. Marcus's smile faltered. A clerical error, Julian. Nothing more. Marcus waved his hand again. Minor. Overlooked. The dismissal was absolute. He still couldn't see past the surface. But Helena's gaze lingered. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked at me. A subtle shift in her posture. A question in her eyes that Marcus would never have noticed. Later, in her own office, she pulled up the report. My name was on the correction. The detail. So small, almost insignificant. But she was looking for patterns, not errors. And she found one. She refreshed the screen. Then again. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. This wasn't just an error. It felt like a message. And she knew exactly who sent it. Helena finally saw it. Not an error, not a misunderstanding. A message, my message. And it was just the beginning. Helena had felt the chill. I knew she'd be looking for the source of that error, but she was looking in the wrong place, for the wrong kind of enemy. The data was small, insignificant to anyone else, but to an investigative journalist it would be a thread, just one thread to pull. Grace, I'd never met her, but she had a reputation for digging. The right kind of hungry for the truth, no matter who it hurt. The public records confirmed it. A minor discrepancy, yes, but a discrepancy that shouldn't exist. She had her hook. The article went live at 8 a.m. Small, buried, but enough. The first ripple in their carefully constructed facade for all the world to see. Marcus called it noise, a nuisance, the kind of thing a good PR team could bury by lunch. He still saw only what he wanted to see. Helena didn't dismiss it. She saw the pattern, the connection to the mistake I had found just days before. The pieces were starting to fit. They issued their statement. A misunderstanding. A routine audit correction. The usual lies. But the questions, once asked, would not simply disappear. Their faces, so calm on screen, they thought they'd contained it. But the seed was planted, and soon it would begin to grow. Helena was smart. She knew the leak wasn't external. It had to come from inside, from someone who knew too much and was too close. She slammed the article down. Snarl, find who leaked this, she snarled. and start with anyone who had access to those files. Helena's office hummed with the quiet tension of too many unanswered questions. She had expected a name. Instead, she found only dead ends. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence of the room. The hunt had begun, and no one was beyond suspicion. I watched the network activity from my own terminal. Every query, every flagged access. Helena was thorough, but I was more so. They called it a routine audit. Cole knew better. He just didn't know what he knew. Their report landed on my desk. Every step of their investigation laid bare. Helena revealed more about herself with every move she made. They found nothing. My access logs were a symphony of routine, a ghost in the machine they couldn't see, because I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I made another request, a minor data pull, buried in a dozen others. Just enough to confirm her next move. The email arrived, another subtle push. Cole hesitated, then deleted it, a flicker of panic in his eyes he couldn't hide. Her patterns were clear. She always probed for the obvious, never the invisible. A predictable opponent was a vulnerable one. Helena's team had nothing. The leak was real, but its source remained a ghost. Her frustration was a tangible thing in the room. I closed the report, not a single trace. Helena had shown me exactly how she hunted and exactly what she couldn't see. It was invaluable. Helena stared at the inconclusive reports, a gnawing feeling that the true culprit was still hiding in plain sight. The paper felt impossibly cold in his hands. He read the single line again, then again, as if the words might change. They didn't. And they shouldn't have existed. Helena's face, reflected in the glass, was a mask of frustration. Her investigation had hit a wall. She knew the leak was there, but she couldn't prove it. Not yet. Her frustration was a detail, another data point. I watched her, absorbing every pattern, every blind spot. She was predictable, even in her anger. Later, in my own office, the older entries of the archive stared back at me. Names, dates, transactions. Some were too opaque, too old for internal records to fully confirm. My mother's meticulous hand had recorded a name repeatedly. Theo, an Ashford lawyer. Disgraced, then vanished. The archive needed an echo from the past. Theo Vance. Marcus had used him, then discarded him. A pattern. He was a man who knew too much and carried the weight of it. He was perfect. His current address was easy enough to find. A small, forgettable office in a part of town the Ashfords never visited. A digital ghost. Now, to make him remember, a burner phone, a secure network, a coded message referencing a lawsuit long buried, something only Theo would recognize, something that would make him look over his shoulder. Theo still used a physical mailbox, an anachronism. Perfect. The message arrived, tucked into a bland legal flyer. Unassuming. Deadly. He unfolded it. The words were simple, direct, a name, a case number. A ghost from a past he had tried to bury. He knew it immediately. He looked up, scanning the room, the window, the door, as if someone stood outside, watching. He was alone, but he knew he wasn't. Not anymore. He fumbled for a lighter, the paper caught, flames licking at the words. He watched it burn, the smoke curling. But the fear, that wouldn't burn away. I knew the exact moment the summons would arrive. Theo wouldn't see it coming. He never did. He burned the first message, a futile gesture. The fire had only given me the confirmation I needed. His old network dissolved the moment the Ashfords turned on him. Now, the few contacts he had left were closing their doors. The ethics complaint was minor, buried deep in an old regulatory file. But it was enough. The kind of thing that could still cost him everything. My mother's archive had given me the leverage. A small piece, yes, but perfectly placed. I watched the reports. He was unraveling. Days turned into weeks. The pressure mounted. He was sleeping less, drinking more. His desperation grew. Good. It was time. I crafted the message carefully. A lifeline, but one with a hook. He would have no choice. His phone vibrated. A new anonymous sender. He opened it, suspicion battling with a desperate flicker of hope. The message offered a way out. Specifics only I would know. He checked the details. It was plausible. Dangerously so. He was taking the bait. Every search query, every nervous cross-reference, all of it confirmed my read on him. He was mine. There was no other way out. He knew it. The choice wasn't really his. It never had been. The reply came quickly. A simple yes, followed by coordinates. The trap was set. He watched the entrance, a ghost in the periphery. I saw his hesitation, the way his eyes darted. This meeting for him was a walk into the unknown. For me, it was just the next step. Theo arrived exactly as the anonymous message had instructed. He checked his phone again, the coordinates still fresh in his mind. He looked for a face, but I knew he wouldn't find mine. His fear was palpable. I let him sit, let him stew in it for a moment. Then I moved. Not a threat, just a presence. He didn't even notice me until I was at his table. He looked up, startled. I kept my face obscured, my voice neutral. The power imbalance was clear, unspoken. He knew I held the cards. He just didn't know how many. I began with a detail only he would know. Project Nightingale, I said. His eyes flickered. A hushed internal code for a discreet offshore transfer 20 years ago. My mother had scribbled it in a margin. He tried to dismiss it, a nervous cough. A common code, hardly unique. But his voice was thin. He was trying to protect himself, to protect them. The Ashfords had taught him fear well. I pressed on. The shell company then, Ether Holdings, registered in '03, dissolved in '06, used to divert funds from the Valencia project. He flinched. My mother's ledger was never wrong. He understood then. This wasn't a guess. This was knowledge. He leaned back, shaking his head. You don't know what you're dealing with, he whispered. They're everywhere. I let the silence hang. Then I offered him a way out of his legal troubles. A quiet word, a subtle angle. The price, I implied, was the truth. The one small truth I needed. He hesitated, fear battling desperation. Then a single name. Finch. Project Finch. A subsidiary shuttered years ago. The missing link. The archive had another piece confirmed. Finch. It unlocked a deeper layer of the Ashfords' old dealings, just as I suspected. Theo watched me, still terrified. You don't understand, he said again. They will destroy you. I rose, leaving him with his fear and his choice. The information was mine. His warning, though, it still echoed. He had no idea how much I already understood, or how far I was willing to go. The number on the screen pulsed red. Helena traced the line with a manicured finger. This was not random. This was a pattern. She knew it. Theo's voice still echoed in my head. More dangerous than you could imagine. He was right. Their arrogance was a shield, but also their greatest weakness. Theo's detail, Project Nightingale. It confirmed a specific entry in the archive, a shell company, buried deep in their offshore network. A minor subsidiary. Easily overlooked. The perfect target for a test. I needed to see how fast they reacted. How deep their vulnerabilities ran. The order was placed. A small, controlled tremor in the market. Enough to be noticed. Not enough to cause panic. Yet, across the city, the ripple began. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the currents. A warning shot. They wouldn't know it was coming from me. Marcus saw the reports. A minor dip. Market noise, he'd probably scoff. Just another fluctuation in his unassailable empire. But Helena, she would see it differently. She was too sharp, too paranoid to dismiss anything as mere noise. Her father's blind spot was her keenest advantage. Marcus waved a dismissive hand, telling his assistant it was just the market correcting itself. He had no idea he was talking about a correction I'd personally instigated. Helena, however, was already pulling up historical data, cross-referencing trends. She would find the anomaly. It was only a matter of time. Their reaction was precisely what I expected. Marcus oblivious. Helena sharpening her claws. The test was a success. Their vulnerabilities mapped. Helena would think it was a rival firm. A random attack. She would never suspect the invisible hand guiding the market's subtle tremors. Not yet. Marcus waved a dismissive hand, but Helena's eyes narrowed on the market data. This wasn't noise. This was a pattern, and someone was orchestrating it. Julian. His gaze was fixed on the screen, a new data stream scrolling. Helena's counter-move was more elegant than he'd anticipated. She wasn't just reacting to his probe, she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Helena didn't waste a second. Her voice cut through the executive meeting, sharp and precise. This isn't market noise, it's a surgical strike. And we will respond in kind. She outlined the new internal protocol for Project Nightingale, a subsidiary I knew was vulnerable. Every data stream, every transaction, now under her direct oversight. The net was tightening. From my office, I watched the subsidiary stock stabilize, then slowly tick upwards. Helena had flooded the market with buy orders. A textbook defense, but also a tell. The Ashford Tower stood against the morning sky, a monolith of glass and steel. Inside, the gears turned, grinding against the pressure I had applied. The machine was not easily broken. Her counter moves confirmed it. Project Nightingale was the critical asset she was now protecting. Its value wasn't just financial. It was connected to something deeper in the archive. I pulled up my mother's notes on Nightingale, cross-referencing it with the faded photograph. The man in the picture, he was connected somehow. Another thread in her tangled web. Helena stood across from Marcus, her posture rigid, a data tablet clutched in her hand. The market is responding, she reported. The attacker will be exposed if they push further. She was good. Better than Marcus, certainly. Helena had seen the pattern, identified the target, and moved to protect it before I could even make my next play. A formidable opponent. Cole found me by the coffee machine, his face pale. Helena just issued a Level 1 directive, he whispered. No unscheduled data access for Project Nightingale. Not even for me. The directive was a trap. She wasn't just defending, she was anticipating my next move. Helena was trying to bait me into revealing myself, to force my hand too early. Later, in the executive lounge, I heard Marcus's booming laugh. Helena's voice was a hushed murmur. Ruthless measures, she said. She wasn't just reacting, she was anticipating. The name printed on the faded document blurred, then resolved. Elias Thorne. It was a name I knew somehow, from somewhere deeper. Helena's words, ruthless measures, echoed in the silence. She wasn't just reacting to my moves, she was playing chess, anticipating the next 3. My initial plan needed a deeper cut. The archive. My mother's notes held more than financial data. There were cryptic sections, coded not for money, but for something else entirely, something personal. Theo's half-confessions, Helena's guarded Project Nightingale. They were fragments. They pointed to the same hidden vulnerability, a foundational lie. The Ashford Tower stood silent against the night sky, a monument built on secrets, and I was deep inside its walls, digging at the very foundation. I began to cross-reference the cryptic notes with the earliest public records of Ashford Corporation, the company's genesis, where it all truly began. Hours passed. The connections were faint, almost invisible, buried under layers of legitimate transactions. It was like sifting through sand for a single grain of gold. My eyes burned. The patterns refused to align. Had I overestimated the archive, or had Helena's counter-move simply obscured the truth even deeper? Then, a single, overlooked annotation. A marginal note in my mother's hand on a decades-old corporate filing. It wasn't about money. It was about a name. The Ashford fortune wasn't built on smart deals. It was built on a deliberate, calculated betrayal. A corporate raid that wasn't just hostile. It was criminal. And there it was. The original partnership agreement. 2 names. Ashford. And the other. Elias Thorne. Ruined, then erased from history. The name on the faded document, Elias Thorne, resonated with a strange familiarity. A name Julian had once seen scribbled in his mother's personal diary. A single, faint symbol, etched into the silver locket. It wasn't just a design. It was a language my mother used, one I had only just begun to understand. Elias Thorne. The name from the document still burned in my mind. My mother had scribbled it in her diary years ago. I needed to know why. The pages were filled with mundane entries, grocery lists, small observations. Then, a single page, dated 3 decades ago. Elias Thorne. Hours passed. The archive, the diary, old news clippings, they painted a picture of a man systematically dismantled. His business, his reputation, his family. The headlines screamed scandal and bankruptcy. But the truth, hidden in the footnotes of my mother's careful hand, was worse. It was theft. Calculated, merciless. Then, a specific detail in the diary, cross-referenced with a faded photograph. Elias Thorne wasn't just a victim. He was family. Distant, but blood. My mother hadn't just endured their cruelty. She had been collecting evidence for a ghost, for a wrong done to her own lineage. My revenge was suddenly heavier, and far more personal. I remembered her quiet strength, the way she'd carry herself even after a reprimand. She wasn't just cleaning their mess, she was watching, always watching. She had left me more than just a ledger. There were other things, hidden in plain sight, small, almost insignificant objects, each with a story. Underneath the false bottom of the locket, a tiny piece of paper, folded tight. A series of symbols. Not words. A code. Another layer. They were not random. A bird, a broken shield, a serpent, each symbol precise. A message. From my mother to me. Or to whoever was meant to find it. The city outside began to stir with the first light of dawn. I had found another puzzle piece, another question. My mother's revenge was older, deeper than I'd ever imagined. A single, coded symbol pointed to a third party. The screen glowed with lines of code and obscure financial markers. A name, half hidden in the data, pulsed faintly. It was a name I knew, but not in this context. My mother's symbol, etched into the faded paper, was undeniably linked to this. A single, almost invisible thread in the vast, tangled web of Ashford's illicit dealings. Another layer, another player. Marcus was just the visible hand, it seemed. I needed to know who pulled the strings from the shadows. Cole was diligent. Too diligent sometimes. That made him perfect. I gave him a task that seemed routine, but held a hidden purpose. My request for historical data cross-referencing on dormant accounts was vague enough. Cole would follow the letter, not the spirit, which was exactly what I needed. Deep within the company servers, information lay dormant. Years of transactions, forgotten names, connections that no one thought to look for. Until now, Cole's initial report was a jumble of irrelevant data. But one name, buried in a footnote, matched a faint pattern from my mother's archive. A single thread, visible now. Grace. She had the tenacity I needed, a carefully worded anonymous tip linking dormant accounts to historical corporate filings. She would dig where others wouldn't. The message was short, cryptic, enough to pique her interest, not enough to reveal my hand. Grace would see the potential for a story where others would see only noise. She started digging. Old news archives, corporate registries, obscure legal documents, fragments of a forgotten past, slowly surfacing. Grace's preliminary findings, combined with Cole's data, formed a hazy image. Not clear enough, but the lines were there. The same names, the same old patterns. Then, a recent transaction. Small, seemingly insignificant. A private investment, listed under a shell company. Marcus Ashford, and the name on the screen. A powerful figure I knew only in passing. Silas Thorne. His silent partner. The data stream on my screen exploded. It wasn't just a reaction, it was an aggressive, coordinated countermove. This silent partner was not subtle. His name had appeared on the screen only hours ago. A powerful figure I knew only through hushed whispers, now confirmed as Marcus's silent partner. A direct attack was too risky. I needed to test the depth of his reach to see how quickly he would react. A subtle ripple, not a tidal wave. I targeted a minor holding 2 degrees removed from Ashford Corp., but a known asset of Blackwood. A single small sell order. The trap was set. The market barely registered it at first. A flicker of red on a distant chart, a minor dip. But the ripple had begun its slow, silent spread. Helena saw it. A minor anomaly, far removed from Ashford's core business, yet she felt the shift. Her eyes always tracking, always searching. Meanwhile, Marcus, in his gilded cage, dismissed it as market noise. He rarely saw the small moves. Only the grand, visible ones mattered to him. Helena tasked a junior analyst to monitor unusual volatility. She still couldn't connect the dots, but she knew something was shifting. Somewhere. I waited. The silence was the real test. How long until the ripple became a wave? How deep did Blackwood's influence truly run? Then the market moved. Not a gentle correction, but a violent surge. Not from Ashford, but from a shell corporation I'd never seen before. The counter-move was precise, overwhelming. Blackwood wasn't just connected, he commanded his own army. My small ripple had found its answer. The counter-move was a clear message. I now knew the silent partner was not just influential, but willing to unleash an unseen force to protect their interests. The screen glowed. An old, disused email account. The subject line was blank. I watched her eyes trace the words, the composure on her face fracturing, just for a second. The wolf wears sheep's clothing within your walls. Their counter-move was precise, a single aggressive strike that confirmed everything. The silent partner wasn't just influential, they had an enforcer, a third party willing to burn money to protect Ashford interests. I sat in the dark and felt the cold certainty settle. Helena would see it. The market volatility was too specific, too coordinated for Marcus to orchestrate alone. She valued control above all else. This would make her dig. Marcus, of course, remained oblivious. He saw only a minor ripple in his vast ocean, a temporary inconvenience, easily dismissed. His arrogance was still his greatest blind spot. Helena, however, was already in motion. She wouldn't let it go. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up corporate registries, offshore holdings, anything that could be connected to the sudden market shift. I tracked her movements, her search patterns. She was good, better than Marcus, but her gaze was still fixed in the wrong direction. A powerful entity, yes, just not the one she was looking for. Her search yielded results. She traced the initial market movements to a holding company, then to a prominent hedge fund, Aegis Capital. A known entity. Powerful, yes, but Aegis was merely a shield. She had found the wrong hand. The message was sent from a burner phone routed through layers of encrypted servers, untraceable. The sender wanted to remain unseen, but their intent was clear, so doubt. Not about the Ashfords, but about me. The email arrived, an old account she rarely checked, a ghost in her machine. She clicked it open. The words were simple, but their meaning hit harder than any market crash. The wolf wears sheep's clothing within your walls. She read it again, and again. The words were a venom. Every interaction with me, every compliment, every solution I'd provided, now tainted. The seed was planted, and it was already taking root. I felt a shift, a subtle change in the air around her. Her emails to me became shorter, her questions sharper. She was looking at me differently. I didn't know why yet, but I knew it was coming. Helena stared at the screen, the cryptic message burning into her. The wolf wears sheep's clothing within your walls. Helena stared at the screen, the cryptic message burning into her. The wolf wears sheep's clothing within your walls. The words were a direct threat, a warning. She knew who the wolf was. She didn't waste a second. Her terminal glowed with new search parameters, a deep dive into Julian's past, his connections, his entire life before Ashford. The investigation had begun. The change in Helena's routine was subtle, but I saw it. Her schedule, her focus. Someone had gotten to her. And whatever they'd said, it had shifted her attention to me. Helena's new scrutiny meant I had less time. The silent partner's identity was critical. I sent a single, untraceable message to Theo, a time and a place. He would come. He arrived precisely on time, a ghost in the dim light of the cafe's back corner. His eyes darted, perpetually searching for a threat. Fear clung to him like a second skin. I laid out the details, dates, names, the shell corporations only he would remember. His complicity in the Ashfords' original fraud, undeniable. His face went pale. He was trapped. He tried to deny it, a pathetic tremor in his voice. But I knew the truth. Every word he spoke only dug his hole deeper. There was no escape for him, not now. The Ashfords didn't act alone, I told him, my voice low. There was a silent partner, the one who made it all possible, the one who truly benefited. Theo closed his eyes, a shudder passing through him. The name of the silent partner unspoken hung in the air between us. He knew it. He just needed to decide if he would finally speak it. He opened his eyes, a weary resignation settling over him. It started with the Thorn acquisition, he whispered. Marcus needed capital, And protection, that's where they came in. They structured the shell companies, Theo continued, his voice gaining a desperate momentum. Moved the money. Made it disappear. Marcus was the face, but they were the architect, always in the shadows. He reached into his worn briefcase, his hand trembling, pulled out a single yellowed folder. I kept it, he said, pushing it across the table. I don't know why. Maybe for this moment. I opened the folder. Inside, the shell company's incorporation papers, and at the bottom, unmistakable, Marcus Ashford's signature. The link was concrete. My mother's archive was a living thing. Every new piece of information I fed it, every new connection, revealed another layer. The map of their empire grew larger, darker. Theo's folder lay open on the table. Marcus Ashford's signature, bold and arrogant, stared up at me. It was concrete. It was real. The silent partner wasn't just connected, he was the architect. The archive had warned me of shadow players but never named them. Now, Theo had given me a name, a direct link to Marcus. It changed everything. They hadn't just taken my mother's life. They had built their entire world on a lie, orchestrated by a hidden hand. Now that hand would feel my touch. My next move had to be precise, a direct attack, but through channels they wouldn't expect. I needed a new kind of data, and only one person could get it for me. Cole was ambitious, eager to prove himself, a perfect conduit. I knew he wouldn't question the complexity, only the challenge. He accepted the task without hesitation. A puzzle, I told him, a way to optimize old data. He saw opportunity. I saw a new weapon being forged. While Cole worked, I reviewed the market. Every move I made now carried greater risk. They would retaliate, but I needed to know how. And where. Hours passed. The quiet hum of the office was broken only by the click of Cole's mouse. Then, a pause. A different kind of silence. It was small. An old transaction, buried deep in the records. Unrelated to anything I'd asked for, but not quite right. He couldn't explain it. He sent the message almost immediately. A simple flag, a question mark hovering over data he couldn't reconcile. My plan was expanding faster than I'd anticipated. The message arrived. A simple notification, but the highlighted anomaly, a ghost in their machine, told me everything I needed to know. The game was on. Helena stared at the old photograph in her hand. Her eyes narrowed. The image was faded, but the mansion in the background was unmistakable. And the boy in front of it. Cole's message pulsed on my screen. A single line of code highlighted. An anomaly in the Ashford books, years old, buried deep. It was small, too small to be accidental. It was a signature. A subtle tremor in the market, a whisper of movement I hadn't anticipated. Helena. She was already here, closer than I thought. The anonymous message had been a seed. Now, Helena was watering it. She sat at her desk, a stack of old personnel files before her, a predator beginning its hunt. Influence. That was the Ashford currency. Helena knew how to spend it. A quiet call, a whispered request, and doors that were locked to others would open for her. I spent the next hour cleaning house. Old email accounts, dormant shell corporations, every digital thread that could lead back to the ghost I used to be. Nothing was too small. Helena found it. A slight discrepancy in my professional history. A gap. A name change. A small crack in the carefully constructed facade. She smiled. I knew she would. A notification. An old, dormant account. Someone was probing. A quiet alarm, confirming what I already knew. Helena was not just looking, she was digging. She walked into my office unannounced, a casual visit, she said. Her eyes, though, were scanning every surface, every shadow. I watched her watch me. I offered her coffee, a distraction, a courtesy, anything to shift her focus from the small, almost invisible details I had carefully concealed. She accepted, but her eyes never truly left the room. Later that night, she returned, a forgotten folder, she claimed. But the security logs told a different story. She wasn't just looking for a file. She was looking for me. Beneath a stack of old quarterly reports, she found it, a single, faded photograph. A boy. A woman. And in the distance, the sprawling, arrogant facade of the Ashford mansion. My mansion. She leaned forward, her voice a silk-lined blade. Such a talented man, Julian, a true marvel given your humble beginnings. Helena stared at the old photograph in her hand. Young Julian, my mother. The Ashford mansion in the background, her green eyes, usually so composed, held a silent accusation. She placed the photo carefully on my desk, face down. The gesture was deliberate, a line had been crossed, and she knew I knew it. Her voice was even, almost sympathetic. I always find it fascinating, she began, how some people simply appear when they are most needed. I met her gaze. Talent finds opportunity, Ms. Ashford, as I found it here, at Ashford Corp. The words were true, if incomplete, she scoffed, a soft, almost inaudible sound. Or perhaps, she corrected, opportunity found you, a child of humble beginnings, rising so fast. She didn't have the full story, not yet, but she had seen enough to build a narrative, one that would dismantle everything. I shifted, leaning slightly forward. My beginnings are irrelevant, Miss Ashford. My value is not. We have a Q3 report to finalize. She paused, a long beat of silence. Just a coincidence then, all of it. Her eyes held mine, searching for a crack. She rose without another word, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. The silence she left behind was louder than any accusation. She had seen the photo. She knew my mother. The game had changed. My private war was now a public battle for my past. My office, my sanctuary. But the air felt different now, thinner. I scanned the shelves, the walls, every familiar line. Then I saw it. On the top shelf, among the perfectly aligned spines. One book, slightly askew. Someone else had been here. They called it The Serpent in the Suit. A single damning headline. It laid out everything they thought they knew about me, wrapped in contempt. The book was still askew. A fraction of an inch. Barely visible, but it was enough. Helena had been here, in my space. I ran a hand over the spine, feeling the cold certainty. Every detail mattered. The dust motes in the air, the faint scent of something floral, not my usual cleaner. She hadn't just looked, she'd searched. I knew what she was looking for, what she eventually found. Helena wasn't interested in a corporate rival. She wanted to expose a ghost, to make me disappear. Then the email started. Anonymous tips to financial blogs. The language was familiar. Helena's signature was all over it, invisible to everyone but me. The article hit the next morning. The Serpent in the Suit. It detailed a minor ethical lapse from a shell company I'd used years ago. Harmless, until now. But the real venom was in the subtext. Hints of humble beginnings. My mother, a long-time Ashford household employee. The narrative was clear. A disgruntled servant's son. My phone began to buzz. First one, then another. Investors, they didn't care about ethics. They cared about reputation. And mine was now a liability. Cole called. His voice was tight. Helena had initiated a review of all external vendor contracts, a direct order. My cover was unraveling fast. The market reacted. A noticeable dip in the shell company's linked assets. Not enough to ruin me, but enough to make my anonymous backers nervous. Very nervous. Helena had played her hand. Not a direct attack on my competence, but a whisper campaign. A suggestion of bias, of personal vendetta. It was a poison for trust. Then the final message came. From my primary financier. A single line. Prove your capability, Julian. Or we're out. The game had just changed. The screen showed the transfer complete. $10 million, my new lifeline. It was a staggering sum, earned not by charm, but by the weight of a secret I had only just deployed. The call came exactly when I expected. No pleasantries. Just the cold, final voice of my former backer. He was pulling out. Immediately. Helena's public attack had done its work. My reputation was compromised, my funding gone. There was only one option left, to deploy the foundational secret. The one even Marcus had tried to bury. I opened my mother's ledger. The name, Elias Thorne. The silent partner. The original sin. I had to find someone powerful enough to care about that kind of leverage. There was only one number I could call now. They called him the architect, a financier who built empires, or dismantled them, with quiet, brutal efficiency. His office was not in the towers but in the shadows. Discreet, unmarked. He listened, impassive, as I recounted Helena's public attack. He knew the game, knew the risks, but he also knew the Ashfords, and he found my current predicament amusing. Then I laid out the truth. Elias Thorne, the silent partner, the original theft of intellectual property that built their empire. I had the documents, the dates, the names, all of it. The smile vanished, the casual arrogance replaced by a calculating stare. My mother's ledger had just bought me a seat at a much bigger table. I stated my price, 10 million, for a hostile takeover. He leaned forward. The terms were brutal, the interest astronomical, but he was in, and I had the leverage to bring down Marcus Ashford. It was a deal I could not refuse. The money hit my account exactly as promised, 10 million, a debt of a different kind. I had traded one vulnerability for another, but this one I could control. This one I could win. The time for subtle moves was over. I opened the terminal, fingers hovering over the command line. This was it, the point of no return. I typed the code, and I pressed enter. Across the city, in countless offices, screens flickered, algorithms spun. The market was a beast, and I had just prodded it awake. The Ashfords would feel the tremors first. The representative's words hung in the air. A deal was made, but the price they named, the one I had to accept, would haunt every step that followed. The market data still flickered, a testament to the chaos I had just unleashed. But the true battle was far from over. I needed more than chaos. I needed power. The private jet cut through the night sky, a sleek, silent arrow aimed at a place few knew existed. This was where the real leverage was found, or lost. The retreat was a fortress of wealth, hidden deep in the mountains. Every stone, every tree whispered of immense, unassailable power. The silence in the waiting room was heavier than any boardroom I'd known. This was not a negotiation. It was an audition. The Obsidian Group representative was a study in controlled power. They didn't even need to speak. Their silence questioned everything I was. My carefully crafted pitch, my numbers, my projections, they meant nothing. He merely steepled his fingers, a silent judgment that cut through my composure. There was only one card left to play, the one I swore I would never expose, the truth that burned at the heart of their entire rotten dynasty. He inserted the chip. The screen flickered to life, showing the name, Elias Thorne, and the details of his utter brutal ruin. I laid out the full story, the stolen patents, the forced bankruptcy, the family destroyed. The true foundation of the Ashford fortune was built on blood and theft. The representative closed his eyes for a long moment. He wasn't calculating risk. He was weighing the ruthlessness of the opportunity. He opened his eyes. "We will fund your hostile takeover, Julian." The words were a quiet victory, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping. "But first, you will eliminate the independent third party, completely, no loose ends." The screen flickered, confirming the upload. A name, a company, a life, collateral. This was the cost of staying in the game. My game. The representative leaned forward, his voice a low hum. The terms were simple. Destroy someone else to save myself. To save my revenge. He named the target Viridian Dynamics, a clean company, no connection to the Ashfords, just another pawn to be sacrificed. The representative explained their philosophy. Power wasn't just taken, it was demonstrated, a ritual of destruction to prove loyalty and ruthlessness. Viridian Dynamics, a minor tax discrepancy from years ago, easily dismissed. Now, it would become a weapon. All for the Ashfords. This was the line. Not just taking back what was mine, but burning someone else's world just to prove I could, just to get closer to Marcus. I scrolled through their financials. Clean. Almost too clean. A small independent firm. They had built something honest. This wasn't Marcus. This wasn't Helena. This was just business. The kind of business that broke people who weren't looking. The memory of my mother's face, the humiliation in her eyes, it pushed everything else away. The price was paid. I would pay it. I began to compile the files, the minor tax evasion, the small, overlooked regulatory breach, enough to ignite a firestorm. Each click felt like a step further into the dark, but the Ashfords had taken me there first. I was simply returning the favor. Grace would receive the package anonymously. She wouldn't know the source or the true price paid. She would just see the story. The notification vanished, the first domino. Soon, the Ashfords would see what kind of man they had truly made. The news anchors were all saying the same name. 1 week ago, few knew it. Now, it was synonymous with ruin. They didn't know the true architect. The email arrived precisely at 06, no sender, only a subject line regarding Project Chimera. And then, the attachment. The files were a digital avalanche. Internal memos, audit reports, shell company registrations. All meticulously cross-referenced. The target, Chimera Holdings. No known link to Ashford. The information was airtight, devastating. But the source remained a ghost. My usual contacts had nothing. It was like a weapon dropped from the sky. I'd always prided myself on integrity, on knowing who I was fighting for. This felt different. Like I was being used to settle someone else's score. The chess pieces were moving. I watched the early market reactions, the whispers beginning to spread. A ripple that would soon become a wave. I felt nothing. Just the calculation. My editor saw the raw data, the sheer scale of it. He didn't care about the anonymous source, only the impact. He saw headlines. I saw a moral tightrope. The early leaks were already doing their work. News sites picked up the initial whispers. Chimera Holdings stock dipped, a corporation, bleeding. And no one knew why. It was a story that demanded to be told. The public deserved the truth, even if I didn't like the hand that fed it to me. Some battles had to be fought, no matter the cost. The hours blurred. Every word, every sentence, a step closer to unleashing the storm. I knew the damage it would do, but the truth, once found, couldn't be unwritten. Then, a single click. The article went live, the first domino. My new backer would be pleased. The Ashfords would feel the tremor. The market reacted instantly, like a wound opened, bleeding red. It was a clear message. The Obsidian Group's ruthlessness was absolute, and I was their instrument. He looked at the document, then back at me. His face was a mask of pure terror, the kind of terror that made a man forget how to lie. The headlines confirmed it. Another corporation, another downfall. Their stocks bled red. I felt nothing but a quiet satisfaction. My new backers were pleased. Now, back to the Ashfords. Theo had been elusive, a ghost in the city's legal circles. But everyone has a weakness, and I knew his. I made the call. He arrived exactly on time, alone. His shoulders were slumped, the weight of years of bad decisions visible in every line of his tired suit. He knew this wasn't a friendly lunch. He sat across from me, a nervous twitch in his eye. I let the silence hang, a heavy curtain between us. Then, I began to speak, not about him, but about the past. I laid the first document on the table. A scanned page from Margot's ledger, cross-referenced with a corporate filing he'd signed. The evidence of a silent partner buried deep in the Ashfords' original deals. Theo's eyes widened, then narrowed. He picked up the page, his fingers trembling. I watched him process the truth, the decades of lies finally catching up. Then I showed him his own signature, not on the original deal, but on the subsequent legal filings, the ones that buried the silent partner's tracks. His complicity laid bare. He stammered, his denials weak, hollow. But there was no escaping it. The paper didn't lie. His own hand had sealed his fate years ago. I let him talk, until the words died in his throat. Then I spoke, calmly, about the consequences, and about the path out. My path. He slumped, defeated. Years of fear, guilt, and complicity crashing down. He took a deep, shuddering breath. Then he began to speak, the words barely audible. He spoke of a contingency file, a backup, detailing everything about the silent partner, but its location. That was the last secret, a secret only Marcus knew. My secure device buzzed once, a single notification, an encrypted message with no sender. I knew instantly who it was from. The silent partner had finally spoken. Theo's words echoed in the quiet restaurant. The contingency file, hidden somewhere only Marcus knew. It was a lock with no key, and time was not on my side. I left Theo, his terror, a useful tool. Marcus held the key, but Marcus also held Ashford Corp. I needed to tighten the screws, force his hand, and fast. My projected market destabilization should have sent Ashford's stock plummeting. Instead, it moved sideways. A subtle, almost imperceptible hand was pushing back. I called Cole. Run a deep dive, I told him. Trace every significant buy order on Ashford Corp stock over the last 12 hours. Find the source. The market held steady. Too steady. Like a hand pressing down on a rising tide, forcing it back. An invisible hand, but undeniably strong. Cole's report came back hours later. Layers of shell companies, offshore accounts, untraceable. They weren't just defending, they were playing a different game entirely. This wasn't Marcus. Not alone. This was something larger, more organized. A silent partner, indeed. And they were just getting started. Meanwhile, Helena smiled. She believed her counterintelligence had successfully misled me. She was so confident in her own cunning. A planted lead surfaced. A whisper about a hidden vault, a paper trail. Plausible. Too plausible, I followed it, wasting precious time. Nothing. A dead end. I stood there, surrounded by decades of forgotten paper, and realized the silent partner hadn't just countered me. They had actively, deliberately misled me. I'd been played. My carefully laid plans, my meticulous research, all of it now under threat from an enemy I couldn't see, couldn't touch. Only feel. My secure device buzzed again. The same encrypted sender. This time a message. A single line. A warning. They knew more about me than I realized, and they wanted me to know it. The numbers on the screen told a story. Not the one the Ashfords wanted, or even the one I expected. It was something else entirely. A ghost in the machine. The message was short. No sender ID. No subject line. Just a single, perfectly coded sentence. You play with fire, Julian. Remember who holds the matches. I gave Cole the task. Find the patterns, I told him. Every anomaly, every hidden hand. I didn't tell him why. He didn't need to know the depth of the threat yet. The data was a living thing. Shifting, hiding. These weren't random fluctuations. This was a symphony of control, played by an unseen conductor. And it was brilliant. Grace's article hit like a meteor. The rival corporation, once untouchable, now a smoking crater. The sheer force of it made me wonder, what kind of hand could wield such power? The patterns, the ruthlessness, it all started to coalesce. Julian's instructions, his intensity. It wasn't just defense. It was something far more deliberate. Something cold. The silent partner's warning echoed in my head. They were playing a different game with different rules. And I was just another piece on their board, one I was still learning to control. I found it, a hidden transaction. Buried in old Ashford reports, a ghost in the machine that perfectly mirrored the silent partner's current moves. Julian had seen this before. He was using their own playbook against them. I saw him in the hallway. Composed, unreadable. The man who had taught me so much. But the closer I looked, the more I wondered if I truly knew him at all. My finger hovered over his name in my contacts. What was I doing? Julian was a genius. But this felt like playing with fire. And I wasn't sure I wanted to get burned. There were lines I wouldn't cross. And I needed to know where Julian drew his. Or if he drew them at all. This wasn't just about numbers anymore. He looked at me unblinking. Waiting. I knew this was my last chance to turn back. But I couldn't. Not now. What is your real endgame, Julian? And what are you willing to sacrifice to get it? I watched his eyes. The moment he saw it, the carefully constructed mask of the corporate analyst shattered. He knew. He finally knew. Cole's question hung in the air. What was my endgame? What was I willing to sacrifice? The answer was everything. And for him to truly help, he needed to know why. I didn't answer him directly. Not yet. Instead, I simply turned, motioning for him to follow. There was only one place where I could begin this story. My office was a sterile space. No personal touches, no distractions. Except one. Cole noticed it instantly, his gaze drawn to the single-framed item on the wall. To show him this, to tell him everything, was a calculated risk. But the silent partner was moving. I needed an anchor. Someone who understood the true cost. Cole waited, silent. His usual nervous energy was gone, replaced by a stillness I hadn't seen before. He knew this wasn't about market data anymore. I walked to the wall, deliberately, slowly, and then I simply pointed at the only thing in the sterile room that belonged to my past. He took a step closer, his eyes scanning the crude lines, the bright colors. Then he looked at me, and I saw the understanding dawned, piece by painful piece. He knew that drawing. It was my mother's, her favorite flower, drawn by my hand when I was 5 years old. It was the only thing I took when I left the mansion for good. I told him about the servants' quarters, the cold, the damp, the constant ache of being invisible. I told him about Marcus Ashford and the spilled drink. I saw the calculation in his eyes, fighting with something else. The scale of the injustice, the sheer casual cruelty. He was seeing the Ashfords not as titans, but as monsters. He finally looked up, meeting my eyes. His expression was still grim, but the hesitation was gone. There was a new resolve there. He understood. The silent partner was getting bolder. Now, with Cole, the game had changed. We would find the contingency file, and then we would find them. The alarm blared, not from a server but from the building's security system. A team of masked figures was already breaching the outer perimeter. I knew then, this wasn't about data anymore. We stood as the last episode ended, the financial charts still glowing. Cole had asked about my endgame. Now, it was time to show him everything. No more half-truths. I handed him the first file. Project Nightingale, I told him. Theo's confession. The silent partner's deep involvement in the original betrayal. Cole's hands trembled slightly as he took it. Then I pulled up the digitized Thorne dossier. My mother's notes, cross-referenced with public records. The theft of Elias Thorne's intellectual property. The ruin of his family. The true foundation of the Ashford fortune. Cole stood motionless reading. He saw it all. The decades of careful lies. The casual destruction. The weight of it settled in the silence between us. He understood the scale now. I then showed him the full Ashford financial network map. Every shell corporation, every offshore account, every hidden asset, and the undeniable pervasive presence of the silent partner woven through it all. A ghost in their machine. Cole looked up from the glowing map, his voice quiet. So what now, Julian? He wasn't asking for an explanation. He was asking for orders. He was with me. The silence was a brief respite. I could feel the invisible threads tightening around us. My enhanced security protocols ran constantly, a quiet hum in the background of our war. I laid out the counter-strategy. The market was a battlefield. We would hit them where they were weakest, leveraging the Thorne dossier and the silent partner's hidden assets. Cole listened, absorbing every detail. Then, a flicker on one of the security monitors. Not a network anomaly, but a physical breach. An external sensor tripped. A cold certainty settled in my gut. They were here. A muffled TRDO to the floor, vibrating the glass. Cole looked up, confusion turning to alarm. It wasn't just a network attack. This was real, physical. The security feed flickered, showing a group of masked men, moving with terrifying speed. They weren't after data. They were after me. After us. The alarm blared. The emergency lights cast long dancing shadows. We moved like ghosts, the sound of splintering wood echoing from the floor above. Every second was a choice between movement and breath. The alarm had screamed, not from a server, but from the building's perimeter. They were inside. Marcus's silent partner had stopped playing games. This was a breach, a violation. My escape route was simple, a maintenance shaft, crude but effective. Cole hesitated, then followed without a word. The sound of heavy boots grew louder. The air thick with dust. Cole fumbled for his phone. A quick tap. A burst of static from the floor above. A diversion. He learned fast. We emerged into the alley, adrenaline still a raw current. The masked figures were already 3 blocks behind us, closing fast. Their efficiency was terrifying. The safe house was a relic, a forgotten bunker beneath a forgotten warehouse. No network access, no windows, just concrete, steel, and silence. My last resort. They knew my contingencies, my escape routes, my protocols. This wasn't just a reaction, it was a preemptive strike. The silent partner's reach was deeper than I imagined. They didn't just breach my office. They knew the exact weakness in the tower's security system. something only a handful of people knew. This wasn't an organization, it was a network. We had 2 days until the shareholder meeting, 2 days to find a weakness in an enemy who knew every move I'd planned. We laid out schematics, financial reports, everything. Every countermove, every preemptive strike by the silent partner was meticulously catalogued. Their patterns, their resources. The scale of it all was overwhelming, felt impossible. This wasn't just about the Ashfords anymore. It was about survival. The silent partner wasn't just defending a fortune. They were eliminating threats, and we were at the top of their list. I was checking our gear, a habit from my early days. Then I felt it. A faint, almost imperceptible bump in the lining of Cole's blazer. Not a button, not a seam, something else. Something horrifying. The gavel fell, a sound that echoed through the room. Marcus's eyes finally met mine. Not with defeat, not yet, but with the cold, dawning comprehension of a vendetta far older than he could have ever imagined. I turned the small device over in my palm. The silent partner's reach was absolute. To place a tracker like this, sewn into Cole's own jacket lining, meant they were inside our perimeter, inside our trust. The market opened in 90 minutes, our final window. Every move had to be precise, every data point accounted for. The silent partner had shown their hand, now we would show ours. Meanwhile at the tower, Marcus and Helena walked into the shareholder meeting. They carried the weight of their name like a shield, unaware it was already crumbling. The market opened. It wasn't a ripple, it was a wave, a tsunami of panicked trades triggered by our data, washing away decades of their carefully constructed illusion. The meeting began. Marcus presided, a king on his throne, Helena his queen, and Cole, my proxy, a ghost at the table, just as I once was. Unseen, underestimated, Cole began. His voice steady, he spoke of anomalies, discrepancies, words that Marcus had dismissed 1,000 times. But this time the numbers were different. They were mine. Then the screen flickered. A familiar face appeared. Theo. His voice, trembling but clear, detailed the original betrayal. Elias Thorne. Project Nightingale. Margot's archive. All of it. The room went silent. The door opened. Every head turned. I walked in. Not as a consultant. Not as a ghost. But as the inevitable. The architect of their ruin. Marcus finally recognized me. The maid's son. His face went white. Helena's eyes narrowed, connecting the threads. I let them see it all. The man they had ignored, the debt they had incurred. I laid out the last piece, the full dossier. The hostile takeover was complete. Their empire, built on fraud and theft, was mine. Marcus's face crumpled. Helena's hand clenched her elegant suit jacket. The board voted, unanimous. Marcus Ashford deposed. Ashford Corporation, mine. The gavel fell. A sound of finality. And then his eyes met mine. Not defeat, something far worse. His face, Marcus Ashford, it shifted from outrage to something colder. He knew what the name Thorne meant. He knew exactly what my mother had been to them. The gavel's echo died. Marcus finally turned, his gaze heavy with a truth he'd just started to grasp. The game wasn't over. It had just changed entirely. He expected a fight, a plea. I gave him neither. I simply moved to the head of the table. The silence that followed was my answer. The old Ashford name erased. New policies etched into every screen. A different legacy, built on a different kind of truth. This was just the beginning. They called it restructuring. They called it asset liquidation. Marcus and Helena called it ruin. I just called it justice. The report landed on my desk, detailing every asset stripped, every account frozen. Their legacy, now a ledger entry. 0. I summoned them. One last meeting. They arrived, still clinging to a sliver of their old arrogance, unaware of the final, inherited truth I was about to lay bare. I showed them the faded photograph. Margot with a man named Elias Thorne, the original architect of their empire. And my mother's distant relative. Their family, Marcus's father, had stolen Thorne's entire intellectual property, ruined him, built their fortune on betrayal. My mother knew. She documented it all. This wasn't just my revenge. This was hers. an inherited quest, for a lineage you thought you could erase. You were wrong. The room emptied. The silence that remained was different now. Not the quiet of waiting, but the quiet of completion. And something else. A new emptiness. The final papers. A new name. A new era. The Ashford legacy was a ghost now. Mine was just beginning. But as I closed my mother's ledger, a small, faded photograph slipped free. A young Margot, smiling, next to a man I didn't recognize, and a building with the logo that felt almost familiar. Julian held the antique coin, its surface cool against his thumb, the subtle symbol etched into its face. He knew then that the Ashfords were only the beginning. The photograph from my mother's ledger. It had slipped out as I signed away the Ashford name. I'd seen the face before, but couldn't place it. Not yet. The corporate logo was subtle, almost generic, but the curve of the O, the specific angle of the G, it was a variant. One I'd seen in my mother's earliest notes. Months passed. The Ashford name vanished. In its place, Verit Holdings rose, a new standard for ethical business. Cole became my right hand. He proved his worth in the fire. Now, Cole commanded the very rooms he once only dreamed of entering. A vision for the future, finally taking shape. Marcus Ashford, once a titan, now wiped down tables in a diner. His arrogance had cost him everything. A quiet, fitting end. Helena, too, felt the weight of their fall. No grand mansion, no lavish parties. Just the quiet hum of a life she'd once scorned. The man in the photograph, Elias Thorne's partner, and the symbol, that same intricate O and G design. It wasn't just a company. It was the Obsidian Group. The Obsidian Group, a hidden network far larger than the Ashfords. They were the true architects of Elias Thorne's ruin, the silent partner in every scheme my mother had documented. My mother's true battle, not just against the Ashfords but against this. All those years, she hadn't just been a maid. She'd been a soldier. Cole listened, his face slowly draining of color. The Ashfords had been a minor skirmish. This was the war, and we were already in it. My revenge was complete, but justice, true justice, required more. It required dismantling every last thread of this hidden empire, starting now.